The genitive case is a grammatical construction typically used for showing possession, and it corresponds to that apostrophe s or s apostrophe that you can find at the end of some nouns. Like when I say Joe's car, which means the car that belongs to Joe, or my parents' house, which means the house that belongs to my parents. Then, saying Joe's car is the same as saying the car of Joe. Pay special attention to the elements of the second sentence that don't appear in the one on the left. When we use the genitive case, the article the and the preposition of are omitted from the sentence. But be careful, because the article that you are eliminating is the article next to the noun that is possessed, not the owner. For example, if we want to say the car of the president using the apostrophe s formula, it would be like this: the president's car. Now, when do we use one form or the other? Is it better to say Joe's car or the car of Joe? Well, when the owner is a person or an animal, the genitive case will be much more commonly used. And when I say a person, it is not necessarily a proper noun like Joe or Mary. It can be any noun that refers to a person or people. For example, a boy's name, the men's bathroom, or my sister's house. Examples with animals can be the dog's bowl or a bird's nest. On the other hand, for things and ideas, we will prefer the of form. For example, it is much more natural to say the leg of the table than saying the table's leg. In some cases, it is possible to use the noun plus noun form for things. This happens when the association between the two nouns is not necessarily about possession, but more about type or characteristic. For example, instead of saying the temperature of the water, you can say the water temperature, or the car engine instead of the engine of the car. In these constructions, the first noun is expressing a characteristic of the second. The first noun is in fact acting as an adjective. But that's a different story. Let's go back to the genitive case. Let's talk about the rules of its use. We will add an apostrophe s at the end of singular nouns. Mr. Johansen's idea. The doctor's office. When this singular noun ends with the letter s, we will normally respect this rule, but we will add an extra syllable to the pronunciation. For example, the boss's daughter or the princess's hair. When the noun is in plural form, we will only add an apostrophe after the final s. For example, my parents' house or the cat's bed. Notice how in this last example, the pronunciation of the expression is exactly the same as if I were talking about one cat, the cat's bed. Here, only the spelling or the context will indicate how many cats we are referring to. As you know, not all plural nouns end in s. There are some irregular plurals like men or children. In these cases, the apostrophe s will go at the end of the word just as for the singular form. For example, a children's book or the men's bathroom. If you have multiple nouns acting as the owners, you can add the apostrophe s after the last noun, like this: Peter and Jenny's wedding, or Jane and Karen's project, which is the project that belongs to Jane and Karen. Now, remember I told you the genitive case is normally used for people? We say Joe's car instead of the car of Joe, and when the owner is an inanimate object or objects, we prefer the of form. The leg of the table instead of the table's leg. There are some exceptions to this though. For example, we will use the apostrophe s form after time expressions, like this: Did you attend yesterday's meeting? I'm not ready for tomorrow's presentation. Last year's conference was in New York. Also, when the nouns refer to groups of people or organizations, it is common to use the apostrophe S form to express possession. For example, the government's decision was very polemic. The company's new product was very successful. This happens as well with nouns that refer to places where people live, like the city's council or the country's flag. As you see, the rules for the genitive case are relatively simple, but they are not obvious or easy to guess for non-native speakers. So, my recommendation is to revisit this video from time to time and practice including these constructions in your everyday speech. See you next time!